Let's get rolling. Like I said, we've got a little ground to cover today. I think it's going to be a fun chat, actually. We're here to talk about preparing for AI and the next big thing, but that all starts with data. And I'm going to be your moderator today. My name is Rob Jordan, for folks who don't know me. I'm the CEO and founder at Idealist Consulting, and I've been doing this type of work for about 30 years. So I've dedicated my life to this space, and it's been a very fun and endearing ride, and I'm glad to be here. So as I mentioned, today's conversation is about preparing, not just reacting to the wave of new technology tools and platforms that are arriving on our doorstep. And this is coming at a rapid pace. We all know that. This is an important topic, so important that we have data readiness package at Idealist, and you're going to be seeing that at other organizations as well. Data readiness is getting a lot of attention these days, from not just the Salesforce community, but elsewhere. And frankly, there isn't a lot of information about it or what it really means. So we're going to explore that and get into the fundamentals and hopefully help you lay a strategic foundation for technology change, including AI and how to lead change with trust and clarity. So I want to speak just real briefly to our distinguished guests today. I am joined by Mark Baseman, the founder of MCG Training and longtime Salesforce educator. And Mark, just a quick icebreaker. Just give us your favorite ice cream and where you're calling out of today.
Ooh, good question. All right. I'm calling out of San Diego, and my favorite ice cream is a local gelato place, and it's an olive oil gelato with agave and orange zest.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Mark is an ice cream snob, everyone. Okay, let's move on to Lori. Lori, thanks. You're a solutions engineer at Apsona, and I think it's important to note why we asked you here. It's a product that we incidentally use at Idealist to help our clients in their deployment efforts. So, Lori, where are you calling from and favorite ice cream?
I am currently in Connecticut, where it is hot and humid. I don't know if I could narrow it down to a brand, but a favorite flavor is definitely mint chocolate chip.
Okay. My daughter's favorite is mint chocolate chip. I don't agree with her either on that flavor, but I know she says the same thing. Okay, Grant, your new haircut and a webinar. Grant Kobenaver is our data migration specialist at Idealist. He has done some incredible work. Enormous amounts of data in some very highly challenging environments. Grant, how about your favorite ice cream, where you're calling from?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think we can call it the anti-haircut since it's getting longer.
It is an anti-haircut. That is true. Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm calling in from Montana, a little small town of about 400 people in the middle of nowhere, and it's hot and dry here right now. Hands down, my favorite ice cream is going to be pistachio.
That's a reasonable one to finish on. Thank you, Grant. That is also my favorite. You may have known that, which is why you chose it. Okay, so yes, I do love pistachio. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to be chatting about three themes. The first is really what understanding data readiness is. So a lot of times this term gets thrown around a lot. It's going to get thrown out a lot more. And ultimately, we want for you to wrap your heads around what this term means and how it applies to your organization. So whether you're prepping for CRM migration or rolling out reporting systems, AI, data readiness is going to be the fundamental of getting that going. So we're going to go ahead and get into that. Grant, would you mind kicking us off what it actually means for a nonprofit to be data ready for technology change? You would know probably better.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. I think from my point of view, fundamentally, particularly for nonprofits, data readiness is really going to be ensuring data is relevant, right? I think a lot of us are familiar with all of the other data best practices that are out there, like deduplication, standardization, completeness, consistency, all of those things. And that's obviously part of data relevancy. But it's not uncommon for, a database over time to start to lose that data starts to lose relevancy. So really your return on investment in any sort of AI investment or technology change is going to be a bit diminished with less relevant data. And one example I can kind of think of right now is a project that I'm working on for a global humanitarian org. We are merging 3 regional NPSP instances into one global NPC instance, right? So a significant part of this is the inner database, inner NPSP instance, and cross NPSP instance matching, merging, deduplicating, and it's a challenge because what's relevant to users in one particular region might not be relevant to users in another instance, right? So there's a little bit of people management going on there as well. And even though this seems like a monumental task, this unification process, or any process like this, just really greatly enhances the relevancy of that organization's data once it's in that new merged global instance. So it really readies, the technology and the data for changes, technology changes and investments in AI. And then the last point on that is that introduces a less tangible aspect of data readiness. And that's really the people. It's the users, your subject matter experts, any external users that might be engaging or interacting with the data in the org. And it kind of leads to the question of, well, are they ready for their data to be ready?
Yeah.
It may result in shifts in processes, shifts in the way users are engaging with the data. So there's really just kind of a human aspect to data readiness as well. And, change is hard, and technology changes can be costly and time consuming. So it's really important for the org itself, tighten up data governance and implement ongoing maintenance programs.
That's great, Grant. I really like that term of data relevancy. I don't think people look at data that way, and I think it's going to be time for them to do that. There's things that you've had historically that may no longer be relevant anymore. And look, we all know it, right? The stuff we put in our closet and we keep it there, and we're waiting. I think I still got a racquetball racket that's sitting in my closet right now, right? Maybe it'll be relevant again one day, but I doubt it. So really deciding what's relevant. And I think the other thing, the notion of doing that across organizations, even though they're federated and probably working on the same mission, the relevancy can vary between organizations. It's great. And then you mentioned about the people. We'll be talking about that later today. So Lori, how does understanding not just cleaning your organization's data contribute to long-term success with systems? I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I love this question because I do see those as 2 separate things. We often talk about quote unquote clean data, like Grant was saying, it's data that's complete, free of duplicates, accurate, well structured. But there's really more to it. It's not just, it's knowing how that data is turned into useful information. So, everyone knows, okay, bad data, dirty data results in unreliable reporting and metrics. And so in part, I'd equate data readiness to data reliability. But in order to have reliable data, you have to understand the data. Successful usage of a new system starts with well understood data. It relies on users having solid definitions and knowledge of their data structures and processes. I would always recommend that someone, or often multiple someones, are dedicated to data stewardship and governance, developing formal written data standards and documenting data management policies. Having users who take ownership to really understand their data can go a long way in the cleanliness and thus reliability of the data. Like Grant was saying, are users ready for the data to be ready? And then kind of getting back to the crux of your question, what does it mean when we say users and even system managers need to really know the data? It doesn't just mean knowing like what is a valid value for a field, or when, or a field should or shouldn't be blank, but it's knowing how those values are how they're used, how they're interpreted by users, how they're related to each other, interactions, how the value affects reporting and KPIs, like what other system functions are reliant on that data. If something that seems benign as a contact that's misclassified, it may not even be super obvious on in reporting that the numbers are a little off, but maybe further down the line, those inaccuracies may be affecting something more critical, like a program funding percentages or grant applications, or how AI interprets the data and responds or makes determinations and decisions. So it's important, to understand not just the data elements individually, but how they're related to each other, and any of that like behind the scenes functionality or automations that are triggered based on values or processes, especially as you're thinking about a migration or new system implementation. It's really critical not just to know how and why values get into the system, but what happens because of those values, what other values are affected. Before AI can know how to react to a request, a human should probably understand the data that fuels that AI response to make sure it's accurately utilizing the source information.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lori. I just want to call out the notion of this data oversight. I think in the past, we've always looked for technology champions, which is sort of a generalist. And I think the story that's sort of revealing itself now is that you actually have to have a caretaker, somebody who's committed not just to the solution, but specifically to the data, the governance, and how it moves. And then I thought the notion that you brought up, and while we don't have terminology for this really, but what you were talking about, this notion of data translation across systems, what might be relevant data to one solution you're using may not be relevant data to another. And if you want to make in those syncing processes, you can create a confusion from that. That's really helpful. And gang, our audience, feel free to pop questions into the chat. We'll be addressing them toward the end. So anyhow, that said, thanks a lot, Lori. So Mark, you've been in this space as long, maybe longer than me. So I'm expecting great things from you here. You've worked with hundreds of organizations. You bring insight that would be additive. What are some of the signs that a team is or isn't ready to handle major changes in their data?
It's a great question, Rob. And it's funny. I love the idea of the data caretaker. I think what often happens is the role of data caretaker goes to the AmeriCorps Vista, who's there for 6 months and is gone. And I probably shouldn't harp on the AmeriCorps program, other than to say often the role of the data caretaker or data steward is not necessarily one that is a sustainable role. So let's talk about organization readiness and team readiness to handle things like data and managing data. And Lori talked about some of these, and Grant did too. But red flags, because those are the fun ones, right? Inconsistent data entry, inconsistent system usage, fear of technology, no training plans, no onboarding documents or videos. Sometimes it's all on one person, and that person is responsible for like the reporting, the cleanup, all of that. These are all signs that this is not an organization that's ready for for data stewardship and managing it. The other thing that I would say is they don't have a regular data hygiene practice. I think Grant's comments earlier and Lori's as well, right? There isn't the notion of data hygiene. That's simply we just put information in the system without necessarily understanding how it's going to be used. So these kinds of things are, like, hey, hold on, we need to establish a foundation. We need to set, what good looks like. So flip all those things on their head, right? So what are those green flags, right? You have consistent data entry. People know what is supposed to go in a particular field. And by the way, some of these things you can do in Salesforce directly, right? I'm zoom in on Salesforce, right? Use those help fields. They're there, right? The help text is you can, don't write a dictionary in there, but for sure you can do that. Recording quick little videos of stuff, it is easier now than it has ever been. And there are a number of tools. There's free, Chrome extensions to help you do this stuff. There are paid tools, something like Snagit. So building those things can, taking the time up front to just do a little walkthrough of entering a specific record can really go a long way towards helping folks. Other things, are people open to learning? From, again, if many of the folks on this call are in a data role or a Salesforce admin role, how are you engaging with your folks at your organization? Do you have regular open office hours where people feel like they can come to you, or are you the ticket fixer? So there are ways to kind of step into that role of, hey, I want to help. Even if you do not necessarily, sit at the top of the org chart, there are ways that you can be the internal resource there. And I think collaborative ownership is really important. And Rob, I'm actually going to ask you about executive sponsorship, specifically around, maintaining data quality. So I'm curious for you, as an executive at an organization, how do you encourage, kind of data hygiene and data quality? Sorry to put you on the spot here, but
yeah, you are putting me on the spot. Well, we got the cobbler's shoes like any organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we do put a fair amount of time into onboarding folks and getting them educated on what the systems that they're using, how to interpret the data that they are entering and what they're receiving. But fundamentally, we do not have a data steward. And I think it's, we obviously have a admin supporting our instance. But it is something that I think we could improve on for sure. Yeah.
Cool. The last thing that I will say, other than kind of being able to identify what a good record looks like at a glance, I think is really important. So people who are entering data, do they know, like, is this good? And there are some fun things that you can do with formula fields where you can do 5 stars. A shout out to the Salesforce Indicators project. That's one of the open source commons projects that has been created to essentially kind of show with little icons on a particular record what good looks like, and you can define those. The other shout out that I will make is there's a great presentation that Michael Kolodner did called the Dashboard of Zeros. The idea being that you're sort of looking at the dashboard, and if there are things that show up on the dashboard that are not zeros, those are anomalies in your data. So the idea that you can sort of look at that dashboard and quickly identify, oh, something looks kind of off. All right, I'll stop there.
No, that's good. A lot of good material there. And we want to make this a practical experience for folks. So thanks, Mark. That was really thorough. Okay, so let's move on to the second theme, which is building a foundation for innovation and Agentforce and AI tools. I mean, one of the things that when we had done this webinar, I wanted to make sure that we were obviously addressing AI, but this is so much bigger than AI. I mean, it as far as like your whole system, it's onboarding, it's your reporting, it's the analysis of those reports. So once your data, let's assume it's all on the right track, the next question is, what can we do with it? So we see the, things like Agentforce offering some big opportunities, but I'd really like to drill down now into this notion of how to build a phased roadmap, set realistic expectations so you're not overextending yourself, and using tools like Apsona to get through some of this stuff. And I do want to call this out. Data readiness without technology supporting you is just close to impossible. You're going to have to inject some type of solution in your data readiness, whether it be deduplication or something like that. So we're going to get into this starting with Grant. Grant, how do you recommend nonprofits begin building a data roadmap towards new tools and platforms? I know you've seen data in so many forms. We've done over 2,000 projects here at Idealist. You've been a part of many of those. So how do you build this roadmap? What do people need to look at?
Yeah, first off, I think it's understanding, in your current Salesforce instance or your current technology, is just understanding the pain points that users are going through. So where are their reporting challenges, where are their data trust issues, going back to what Mark was saying about, is this a good record, right? So understanding where those issues are, and then, what processes in place may be preventing users from efficiently completing their work, right? And then in conjunction with that, I think it's really important to understand kind of the what's and how's, the ins and outs, or however you want to put it, of the new tools and or platforms that you'll be utilizing or moving on to. I think looking ahead and understanding data models, capabilities of the new technology, things like that, can be very helpful in visualizing your data in a new context and how that new context will solve problems, and even beyond that, how it might even create more problems, because that's not uncommon, right? To go into a platform, and the new data models, new processes can actually create other problems that you need to work around and deal with. From there, this is going to kind of hit a little bit on what we were talking about previously, but around data cleansing. But really, after you kind of figure these things out, you kind of go after the low-hanging fruit, right? So a system admin can go after the low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of great user-friendly third-party tools out there performing and maintaining, data tasks. Obviously Apsona being one of those. So dedupe your contacts, dedupe your organizations, identify fields that you no longer need, and then purge any data that's no longer relevant, right? It's not uncommon to see a Salesforce org with 500,000 tasks in them from 20 years ago that are just reminding someone to call their coworker and remind them that they have lunch today. We don't need that. We don't need that data anymore, right? We can purge that stuff out. And then for the nonprofit folks, we know that accidental admins, as we like to call them, they're alive and well in that space. I was one. That's how I got into this. I was an accidental admin and fell in love with the whole ecosystem. And then obviously paired with relatively high turnover in the nonprofit space, a database's life cycle can be a bit tortured, right? Processes are implemented, staff changes, the database gets neglected for a couple years, some new staff come in, they like spreadsheets, then someone comes in excited and revives the database, puts in new processes, so on and so forth. It's extremely common. We see it all the time. And it's all good intentioned, but it does ultimately, result in less than hygienic data. And so imagine having several databases used in different ways over time. So, this is where we would kind of think about bringing in an external consultant to, build that data roadmap out a little bit more, clean that data, understand what's going on. And that's really where we can dive into a deeper cross-field, cross-object, cross-database type of analysis. And that really helps us understand where data may be overlapping, and just really just kind of further helps us define, what can be purged, what fields can be left behind, so on and so forth. And then, once data standardized, normalized, where it makes, it makes sense. I mean, it's restructured. It just really just makes it more digestible by AI and other tools. And
Mhm.
conversion processes like these are tedious, and oftentimes, it's a high engagement from the client. Like some of this work needs a human eye. We can do a
Yeah.
lot of this programmatically, but it's still programming language still, in my opinion, is not as sharp as a human eye.
Yeah, that's I mean, I think that's the conversation we're all having with ourselves. AI versus
Yeah,
man versus machine. And I think you're right, Grant. The um there is the human eye that still ends up getting to those relationships that we were talking about, the relevancy.
absolutely.
It's really hard for
Yep.
AI to recognize that.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, before we pivot over to the next question, I want to speak briefly about something Grant brought up, which is this idea of a life cycle for your data. Where are you in your life cycle, right? Where is your data sitting? Is it on the ebb or flow? And how did it get there? And when's that going to happen again? Because it will, right? And I think there's this idea we're going to get it all perfect and then we'll be fine. But there is an ebb and flow to that. And I think that gets back also to the governance, the data governance, and the chaperone for your data. So let's pivot over to Mark. Mark, when we get the data foundation ready, we start looking towards innovation, and that usually means AI. So, what's often overlooked when introducing AI tools to nonprofit teams in relation to data?
Yeah. I will just confess to this audience and everybody here, I have really mixed feelings about AI for a variety of reasons. I when I hear CEOs say, "Hey, we're replacing half of our labor force with AI," it keeps me up at night. And yeah, it doesn't make me personally feel good. That said, I do use AI in the course of my day to day. And I think, obviously we've talked about clean data as a foundation. I think one of the biggest things that are overlooked is what's the use case? Like how should we use AI? And I think often people are throwing AI at, AI as a solution looking for a problem. And I think one of the things that, certainly folks on this I would say, are probably consider themselves innovators or at least early adopters, let's say. Start with some use cases that you understand and you trust. Without a clear use case, why bother? And by the way, this does not need to be something complicated, right? This can be super simple. Are you using AI to help with a grant? Are you using AI to help write a Salesforce formula or a report criteria? AI can be as simple as that. And, it can be whatever, tool you want. I just got notified that Google is increasing the price of my Google Workplace subscription because they're bundling in AI. So I can't even opt out of it. Thanks a lot, Google. So anyway, all of that to say, AI is often starting to get baked into these tools that folks are using every day, whether it's Microsoft Copilot or Google Gemini or what have you, right? Your favorite, pick your favorite tool, ChatGPT, what's going on. So I think, starting with what are those use cases? Starting simple. And then, of course, trust, right? AI tools are only as good as the confidence and the context behind them. So I think Lori talked about this earlier and Grant did too, to some extent. But, trust, but verify, right? Is AI making up fields in my formula? Is AI making up the answer? So, typing something in AI and having it spit out a result is great, but you often do need the human in the loop and you need to double check. You can't just sort of blindly like, okay, great, I'm going to copy and paste this result into a Google Doc or a presentation. So yeah, the importance of that human oversight, I think, is great. And being public about those small wins, like, okay, we did the thing. Let's broadcast. We used AI in this context, and actually it helped us. It saved time and sharing within your, within your team, within your work group, within your organization. But, I think the reality is we're all, I think, running on limited capacity and limited bandwidth for adopting new things these days. So just being cognizant of that. People are at different parts of the what's known as the Rogers adoption curve. So you might think you might personally be an innovator or an early adopter, but your organization, they tend to be a little bit more conservative. And you can probably point to specific individuals like, oh yeah, that's what's known as a laggard in the terminology. And I'll throw a link in the chat here to this, what's known as the Rogers adoption curve. But anyway, all of this to say, different people are at different stages of that curve. So even you might be ahead of your organization. So, and I would just say, last thing, have a AI usage policy at your organization, just to have it covered. And you might not be the author of that policy, but you might want to, have AI help you draft an AI usage policy, or talk to your peers who are using AI. I'll stop.
That's great. Yeah, Mark, I think we all have a little trepidation about AI, but I think about our relevancy. I think like that shirt, for example, that you're wearing. I like that shirt. That's a good looking shirt. I bet you AI did not pick out that shirt for you.
Not yet. Right.
Not yet. But that fantastic shirt is a testament to all of our relevancy still. So we're
But for how much longer, Rob? I'm watching too much Black Mirror. So anyway.
I do also want to mention the innovation comment you made. The folks that are on this call are the innovators, right? And they have to be the leaders to be able to bring this stuff forward. And it's, we want to be careful. We're preaching to the choir in a lot of cases, but the bigger challenge is not just the innovation, it's bringing people along with it. Okay, so let's move over to, we've got I think we're doing a quick presentation, right, Lori?
Yeah.
And you're going to give us some practical stuff around Apsona. So I don't know if I'm in charge here. I hope I'm not, of shifting over to your screen.
We all hope you're not, right?
It looks like I have the ability to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, I trust you. Go ahead and take it away, Lori.
Awesome. So, I just wanted to kind of start off with a couple comments. I think most orgs are fully aware that they have some data issues. I've never heard anyone say my data is 100% accurate and complete. But, these issues are often kind of pushed to the back burner, or they're dealt with individually as they're discovered, rather than taking a proactive approach to identify and resolve issues. And not because they're not deemed important, but I think more often it's because users don't know where to start, and they expect it to be such a daunting task. But then in preparation for something like a data migration or for implementation of AI or whatever, then it becomes a higher priority. And, Apsona, like many other tools, can really increases visibility to data and thus data issues. But Apsona also gives you some tools to resolve those issues too. So I think what we're seeing is that a lot of users are realizing, how easy that whole process can be with Apsona, both, identifying the problems and solving the problems. That said, I kind of see a precursor to that, just what we've been saying, that really understanding the data, both from just like a value and a relevancy perspective, by actual human beings. I think that is a step that needs to happen before you even attempt to clean the data. Because if you don't know what the data should look like, or if you don't understand it, resolving issues is going to be a fruitless effort. So, like we've been saying, that the most common data issues, duplicate records, inconsistent values, invalid or missing data, sometimes pick lists or other like classification or categorization fields. So I am going to jump into Appsona if I can select the right screen to share.
And Lori, just to make sure we got time for Q&A, if you may need to accelerate your presentation just a bit. So don't rush, but if there's some points you can move through, that'd be great.
No worries, no worries. I'll put it on fast forward. So first, I'm assuming you're seeing my screen. Okay, thumbs up, great. So first, let's talk about deduping. In Appsona, you can perform deduplication. You can identify duplicates and merge those records for any object, including custom objects, managed package objects. Any object or field is available in Appsona, and something that an approach to deduplication that we typically recommend is iterative, in that you're going to have some low-hanging fruit, right? You're going to have records that the first name, the last name, the email address, the physical address, everything matches. You're pretty darn sure that this is truly a duplicate. And then there's going to be more less strict matching criteria that these you probably need, you really need human eyes on. So I'm just going to kind of really quickly walk through what creating a dedupe action looks like. The first thing you do is select your subset of records. In this case, we're looking at contacts. Do you want to search all of your contacts, or is there's some, and you can do that if you want, but is there some subset of records that you want to search? What are the fields that determine your matching criteria? There's some pre-built functions that can make, control how those matches are evaluated. Any additional fields you want to see in the output that might be useful in determining, is this truly a duplicate? Some grouping options. I'll fast forward through the details there. Master field rules, meaning what logic is Appsona going to use to determine which is the record you want to keep, the one that the duplicates get merged into. And some other options. So when I click find, based on all the criteria that I've just defined here, it's searching through all of those contact records and coming up with a list of potential duplicates. You can kind of see they're kind of grouped. This like lavender heading is each group. I have the option of selecting each group, selecting individual records. I can scroll over to see all of the fields that I've included in my additional fields. I also, if as I'm looking at this, I'm like, well, I'm not really sure if these are really duplicates. I want to see more information. I can click that kind of conjoined arrow and see every single contact field, either every single field or only the ones that don't match. And what I can also do is then go through this list and pick and choose like custom combination and then merge. So I'm creating like a custom merged, a final merged record. Also, I can click this little arrow that will take me to the actual Salesforce record if I need to dig a little deeper. You can also see that based on the rules that I established, the master record is the one with the little checkbox next to it, and you can see it's bold too. But if as I'm reviewing this, I say, oh no, that's not really, that one shouldn't be the master. This one should, I just have to click on it. It's pretty easy. So it's a really flexible way to identify and merge duplicates. Okay, moving on. Inconsistent values. This is honestly, I use this example all the time because I see it in almost every org that I work with, in that, so I've created a very simple report that's just pulling in the country field and counting the number of records. And as we can see, I have a variety of values for domestic countries. And according to our internal data standards, which everyone should have, United States spelled out is actually the correct value, which means I need to fix all of these. So a number of ways I can do that in Apsona. The simplest is using Apsona's tabular view. This is something you can do with any object. I've created a very simple filter that just finds all of those bad country values. In this case, I've got 17 records. You can see here's the country field here. I could just click into this field, correct it, and then save that record. However, for like 17 records, okay, sure, that's fine. But if this was 1,700 records, probably not a good use of my time to individually change them. But from the Tools menu, I can choose this Update All option, find that country field, enter the appropriate value, click Update, and voila, all of those records have been fixed. Yay.
It's great.
Okay, moving on. Often we see this a lot with migrated data or pick list values that are no longer active, but records still have those values and they need to be changed. So for example, here, if I look at this contact type field, first, second, and third are no longer active values. I know this a couple of different ways. If I click into that field, I'm not going to see that as an option to choose anymore because it's invalid. It's no longer active. Well, so what is the right value for this record? This is where that human thing comes into play, where I might be looking at this record and say, oh, okay, they have a membership join date. They should be a member. And maybe this record, oh, they've given us a donation. We're going to call them a donor. And I could go through this list one at a time, but what happens when I get to Celestina? Well, I don't really know. Is she a member? Is she a donor? What's the deal here? Using Apsona, I can pop out, I can click this little caret and pop out to see related information. I can view account information. This is all configurable, by the way, what information you want to see here. Has she given a donation? Does she have relationships with anyone? Is she a member of, oh, look, she's a volunteer with one of our programs. So we might call her a volunteer. So now, again, I'm looking at 12 records here. I could go through each one of these, look for the ones that, okay, this one too, I'm not really sure. Let me look at this related information. Oh, this is someone who's a parent of a current, a participant in one of our programs. But this is going to be really time consuming, even with just 12 records. But what I could do, I could simplify this a couple different ways. I'm like, okay, well, I know anyone who has a membership join date, I want them to be, I'm going to update all of these to be members. So I've created an inline filter. I can then do that same option of updating all, then do the same thing for the gift date. But I can actually make this a little bit easier. Because I've got that logic, if I go to that update option, I can actually build an expression that, let me see, fixed contact type, where I'm saying, okay, if there's a join date, they're a member. If there's a gift date, they're a donor. If not, let's just stick with whatever their current contact type is. But now that's great. That's a great way to do that, but that's kind of simple, and it still doesn't account for the related records, the volunteer records, the parent, the relationship records. So to take it even one step further, I can create an Apsona multi-step report where I'm actually pulling in all of the relevant pieces of information. I've got the membership information, the giving information, there's my relationships, the children, volunteer, and creating a JavaScript calculated field. I've just used some logic that says, okay, if they've got a join date, they're a member. If they have a gift date, they're a donor. If they are a volunteer, they're a volunteer. If their child is a participant, they're a parent. So, and this is honestly really overly simple. You could have multiple nested conditions in one field, so it can be much more complex than this. But now when I run this, I've got my contact ID here. I've got the proper contact type. I can just export that list, remove all the extraneous stuff that I don't need that was like my helper fields. Then in Apsona, just paste that data in. What I've actually gone to here is from the contacts. Let me go over here. Where do I have that? From the tools menu, I've launched into that import update option where I've used a saved mapping for fixing my contact type. I've got the ID, the new corrected contact type. I click next, next again. It's ready to import. I click import, and now all of those records have been updated. So we've seen how to deduplicate, how to deal with inconsistent records, and also invalid or missing types in the fast-forwarded version. How was that?
That was good. And I know I think you cut out about 2 minutes, so I appreciate that. And in our next theme, we'll have to move relatively quickly, gang, if we want to give folks time to. So we'll have about a 1 minute blitz response. Lori, thanks for that. It's interesting. Apsona is so much more than just a deduplication solution. And I just want folks to hear, we get no referral fees from Apsona. We work with them because we think they are a good solution. And that's where it begins and ends. And they are also one of the sponsors for the engagement party that we do at Dreamforce. And thank you for that. That is a non-profitable experience, and we can't make it happen without our sponsors. So thanks, Lori. So let's go to the last theme. We got to go quickly, gang, because I want to give space. I just saw a couple good questions come in. Folks got questions. Let's hear them. But we'll get to them in just a moment. So this is about leading with trust in time of change. I think about a previous director that had worked here, and she used to say, we're not in the tech business, we're in the people business. And I thought, boy, that's an interesting and appropriate way to say it. So what does it look like to lead through change with clarity and care, right? We're working with people. It means communicating early and often. It means bringing users into the process. It means showing how these tools don't just serve the system, they serve the mission. And it means honoring legacy ways of working, even as you move forward to something new. So Grant, let's move over to you again. Let's try to keep this short, gang, up to a minute. What does it mean to build trustworthy data systems? And why is that so essential before rolling out new tools and embracing innovation?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'll try to do the blitz answer on this in 1 minute. Obviously, from a technical standpoint, a trustworthy data system is going to be rooted in trustworthy data. That's largely what we've been talking about this entire time. So if users don't have data that they can trust, then no one will really have any buy-in and or any interest in even using the system, right? Once you get the data cleansed, relevant, complete, more trustworthy, so on and so forth, then your system does become more trustworthy. And then beyond that, largely speaking to the Salesforce admins, is data governance. Make sure there's the correct policies and procedures in place, that they are enforced, so that data can remain trustworthy. And so for the admins, think validation rules, certain processes. Pay very close attention to your integrations. I see those often being killers of data quality. And so, I guess in short, trust your data, trust your system, and technology shifts will happen more smoothly.
Thanks, Grant. Mark, how can nonprofit leaders model confidence and empathy when introducing that new technology?
This is obviously a question that needs more than a minute, so I will try to keep it short and sweet. I think, you mentioned this already, Rob, but, having that clear plan and vision and communicating it early and often, I think is really, really important so that people understand where you're trying to get to. I think it's, and any leader needs that. Being open about your own learning journey, so modeling curiosity and vulnerability. I'm thinking about this as it relates to AI, right? Like I started talking about, hey, I have really mixed feelings about AI. That's true. And as a leader, it's okay to model that vulnerability. And in fact, it makes you more trustworthy, more human. And, again, it's progress, not perfection. We are, crawl, walk, run. We're not expecting people to, come out of the gate with these perfect new tools. Two more things. Make sure you're identifying those champions and celebrating them. So it, potentially is the burden is not necessarily all on you. You're encouraging folks to kind of adopt and or be little mini versions of you. And if you do have tech resistant folks, which who doesn't, bring them in early, address their concerns. They can really be your biggest champions if they feel heard, and getting them in their input kind of upfront is really helpful.
That's great, Mark. Thanks. That notion of trust. It's interesting to use that when we're talking about ones and zeros, but that's what we're talking about. And it's true. It's important. Okay, these are some great questions here, fantastic questions. And I just want folks to know that we'll be rolling outside the hour for answering questions. Our guests, if they have to pop off, they can, but we'll kind of do a long tail here for folks that want to hear as many questions as we can answer. We probably won't go much too past the hour, but want folks to know that's available. I'm going to field the first question from Eric, which these are all such good questions. Wondering what the panel thinks about new data models, how new data models could be less rigid. If AI can understand relationships, do we still need rigid CRM data models? Man, I'd love to answer this, but I don't get the chance. So which one of you wants to take this one?
I could speak to a little bit. I don't think I can give a precise answer on this, other than it probably depends on how you need to use how you're using that system, right? Is it going to be purely AI based as far as your engagement with your data? Then yeah, maybe it could be less rigid. Are you going to have integrations and other reporting needs and other processes happening with that data? I would say then you probably need to maintain a more rigid data model.
That's great. Thanks, Grant. Let's get to the next question. This is from, it's an anonymous attendee. We've got quite a few from those. So it's either one person who's really interested in the data or multiple folks. We'll see by their questions. So how can an organization assess where they're strongest and where they need the most work across these areas? Sounds like a people challenge. Mark, you want to give that one a go?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there are two dimensions to this question. I think there is a people piece to this. So, this is something as basic as, do we have onboarding processes? Do we have systems? Do we have training manuals? Do we have shared definitions around, how the system is supposed to be used? Do we have an AI policy, for instance, right? So just straight up, do we have it? If we don't, probably got to build it. Maybe you can use AI to help with some of those tools. So in terms of just like the people, the systems, the process, I think it's as simple as a checklist. I think there is a data dimension to this, which is where are you strongest and where do you need work? And I think this is something like using a tool like Epsona is invaluable, right? Where you can create these multi-step reports that Lori demoed around like, hey, let's see what our data is. So if we do need a bunch of work in our data, this should hopefully easily point that out. But yeah, I think also ask people, literally.
Talk to people.
Talk to people. And, this is, it sounds dumb, but it is really, really true. Like, ask people, how do they feel about this stuff? And you can do it in a survey form, sure, and get a, very light, pulse. But I think just talking to people, especially in this virtual environment, I think those connections are all the more important.
And for you data admins out there, don't take the response personally. having been a data admin, hey, how do you feel about things? You may not get the answer you want. So, you know, does this shirt look good on me? Just be prepared for whatever the answer is going to be. Okay. Lori, this one is clearly for you. The dedupe and match feature that you shared, is it an add-on or does it cost extra? And I think that is interesting. Epsona has more than a deduping solution. Without going too deep into the pricing model, is that a fixed offering or is it offered in tiers?
It's not a simple answer, Rob, only because Apsona recently restructured their pricing model where at one time it was kind of an a la carte model where if you wanted multi-step reports, that was the license you paid for. If you wanted the dedupe and match tool, that was another license. We've decided to simplify and just bundle everything together. So, and that said, there are also within that bundle, there are tiers based on the number of users that you need.
Got it.
That said, we still have customers who are still in both camps. You know, there's some newer ones that are in the bundles, some it would be an add-on because they're in the old structure. So not really a simple answer, sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. Pricing is something that's changing with AI. We know this. Recently read an article in The Economist about the challenges of pricing AI and the different models. And so it stands to reason the solutions supporting them are going to be under some, they're going to have some differing models too. So, okay, final question. And for folks that have to hop off, feel free. But fundamentally, before you get going, feel free to access our data readiness resource bundle. The stuff we've talked about here today, some additional things are all going to be available in there. And that's really, you know, having been on both sides of this as a speaker and then also showing up as an attendee, we really wanted to give some practical stuff for you to take away and not just hear us chatting the whole time. So there's some good material in there. Take a look at it. Okay, last question that we've got here looks like for leaders dealing with change fatigue and or low morale, what are some first steps to build momentum and engagement again? Low morale, I can't imagine that's happening very many places. The world's such a lovely place right now. Strange question. Not a strange question, very relevant one. Mark, I feel like you're well poised for this. And if folks have additional things to add beyond Mark, please feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, but I would love to hear from Lori and Grant also. I mean, I think creating a space for questions and real emotions around this stuff, you know, given the state of the world today, I think there is a lot of, I want to think about how I want to phrase this. There's a lot of background noise, let's say, as you know, when people are coming to work, right? You're starting at an 8 or a 9, so you don't have very much capacity, right? You're already almost full, or maybe I'll flip that analogy. You're starting at a 2 or a 3. Your tank is almost empty, and you don't have too much reserves to draw from. So flip that analogy around. But the idea is, you know, creating space for those questions and emotions as it relates to technology change. If this is like a cleanup project or a fix-it where you're trying to re-engage folks, maybe do an open retrospective about what worked and what didn't last time. There's a bunch of templates if you're using, you know, an online tool like a Canva or a Lucidchart or something. There's a ton of templates around for doing like a retro, as it's called. But you know, having the space to talk about that stuff, I think, is really important, because the reality is that everybody's dealing with this, and you know, you are not alone, and reinforcing that, I think, is really important. You're not alone personally, you're not alone as an organization. But I want to hear from Lori and Grant as well, if you all want to share.
It's a tough question.
I would say I would just put a big fat ditto after what Mark said. I really believe that giving users the opportunity to share how they feel, or to make suggestions for functionality and you know, system, to alleviate the issues that they're running into, or the reason that they have that fatigue or frustration or low morale, I think would go a long way.
Thanks, Lori. Grant,
Yeah.
on the ground, you're on the ground with a lot of this. You're moving that actual data around.
Right,
What are your
right.
thoughts on that
Um,
question?
yeah, in my opinion, it's going to go back to that bit I was talking about, dive into those pain points, right? Like understand where users are having issues and try to resolve those issues and just make them part of that conversation, right? Let them know that you care, that, hey, I see your pain points. Yeah, the data is not great. The reporting's not happening the way you want it to. Let's start to uh, remedy some of these things. And you might get some momentum that way.
Yeah. Look, we are may you live in interesting times. We most certainly do. And we all got to just show up with our best selves, focus on the things we can control, which lucky for us is data. And that's something that we can, it really is a place that we can start moving the needle and watching that success. I think that's one of the fun things about data. Yes, data can be fun. It can feel like you've actually achieved something. You're looking at Grant. I'll finish with this quick story and we'll wrap things up today. But I remember Grant had started as an accidental admin, and then we were lucky enough to find him and hire him. And then he was a very serious BA. And then I turned to him, I don't remember how long ago it was, Grant, but I said, Grant, we need a data migration specialist. I want you all to imagine hearing that. We want you to be a data migration specialist.
I hated data migration. Yeah, I hated it. Absolutely hated it.
We want you to mop floors and,
Yeah.
And Grant said what any reasonable human would say, no, thank you. I'm not interested in that. And then we replied with, please. And Grant ultimately decided to be a data migration specialist. And he has when I say Grant has dealt with big data sets, these are astronomical numbers in the millions.
It's fun.
Okay, hear it here first, folks. It's fun, and there is a relationship you can build with data. That zone you get in when you're configuring something. We've all felt it, whether we're on a bicycle or moving records around. And the same thing can happen with data. So let's end on that note. And thank you all for a fun webinar. And I appreciate the attendance of folks that made it. And the questions were fantastic. Thank you. Have a good one all.
Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.